It started on a quiet Sunday morning, the kind of morning where the streets looked too perfect to be real. Manicured lawns, freshly painted fences, the hum of sprinklers cutting through the still air. Maplewood Estates was the kind of neighborhood where people smiled too wide and whispered too often. But that morning, something was different. A red spray-painted message stretched across a pristine white garage door. The words were ugly, jagged, almost angry. "Get out, loser." The paint dripped down like blood, pooling near the driveway. Neighbors gathered, pretending to be shocked but secretly thrilled that something had finally disturbed the quiet. The house belonged to Daniel Harris, a 42-year-old mechanic who'd moved into Maplewood just 6 months earlier. He wasn't like the others. He didn't wave much. He didn't show up at HOA meetings, and he drove an old pickup truck that coughed black smoke every morning, a mortal sin in this picture-perfect neighborhood. As people whispered, the HOA president, Richard Langston, stood in front of Daniel's house, jaw tight, arms crossed. Behind him, his 17-year-old son Ethan watched, pretending to be shocked like everyone else. But Ethan's eyes betrayed something else, a flicker of guilt, quickly buried under a practiced smirk. Richard spoke loudly, making sure everyone heard. "This is unacceptable. We don't tolerate vandalism in Maplewood. I'll make sure whoever did this pays for it." Daniel stood at his door, arms folded, silent. His jaw clenched. He didn't trust Richard, he never had. The HOA president had always found a reason to fine him: too many weeds, a dented mailbox, an unauthorized wind chime, and now this was too much. The crowd slowly dispersed, murmuring their theories. Some pointed fingers quietly, mostly at Daniel himself. "Maybe it's a stunt," one woman whispered. "He's always been strange." But behind all those whispers, the real culprit, Ethan Langston, stood with his hands in his hoodie pockets, feeling the faint dry crust of red paint under his fingernails. It wasn't supposed to go this far. He hadn't meant for anyone to notice. He just wanted to scare Daniel, the man his father couldn't stop complaining about. But the moment he saw the crowd forming, the moment he saw his father's stern face turning red with fury, something inside Ethan snapped. And when his father demanded, "Does anyone know who did this?" Ethan's heart started racing. Everyone's eyes were darting around. He could feel the weight of suspicion in the air. So he did what came naturally to him. He lied. "I saw someone last night," he said. His voice trembled just enough to sound believable. "That guy across the street, the one with the black hoodie, the new neighbor." All eyes turned toward Ryan Coleman, a quiet 26-year-old who had just moved in 2 weeks ago. Ryan worked night shifts at a data center and rarely talked to anyone. He was tall, thin, and often wore a black hoodie when walking his dog late at night. Richard's eyes narrowed. "Ryan Coleman, you saw him?" Ethan nodded quickly. "Yeah, around 11 p.m. he was near Daniel's driveway. He looked sketchy." The crowd murmured again, louder this time. Ryan wasn't even home at that moment. He was asleep after a long night shift. But when the rumors reached him hours later, it was already too late. The damage had been done. By evening, the HOA board had called an emergency meeting. Richard led it, of course. He stood at the podium like a king in a small-town court, with his son seated proudly in the front row. "Neighbors," Richard began, his voice full of authority, "we've had an act of vandalism today, the kind of behavior that destroys our community. But thanks to my son Ethan, we may already know who's responsible." He gestured toward Ethan, who sat pretending to be nervous. "According to Ethan," Richard continued, "Ryan Coleman was seen near the property late last night. I've already filed a report with local security. If necessary, we'll involve the police." The room filled with gasps and whispers. And just like that, Ryan Coleman became the villain of Maplewood. The next day, as he left his house, he could feel eyes on him, blinds shifting, curtains twitching. No one waved anymore. A woman crossed the street to avoid him. Even his mail came later, as if the carrier didn't want to linger too long near his door. He tried to explain, but no one listened. When he confronted Richard, the HOA president simply said, "We're just trying to keep the neighborhood safe, Ryan. If you didn't do it, I'm sure the investigation will clear things up." But there was no investigation, just gossip. Meanwhile, Ethan was falling apart inside. He thought it would be over after a few days, that people would move on. But now, every time Ryan walked by, Ethan's stomach twisted. He could see the exhaustion in Ryan's eyes, the quiet humiliation of being judged for something he didn't do. And yet he couldn't confess. Because his father was so proud of him. That night, Richard had patted his shoulder and said, "You did the right thing, son. You stood up for this community. I'm proud of you." Ethan forced a smile, but his throat burned. He'd never heard those words from his father before, not once. The Langstons had a perfect image to maintain. Richard was known as the man who built Maplewood's gold standard. He inspected lawns, organized cleanup drives, and fined anyone who didn't comply. Even his own wife, Laura, seemed exhausted by the act, smiling for the neighbors, dying quietly behind those smiles. That evening, Laura noticed Ethan sitting alone in his room, staring at his hands. "Rough day?" she asked gently. He didn't answer at first, then he said, "Mom, what if someone gets blamed for something they didn't do?" Laura frowned. "What are you talking about?" He shrugged, forcing a laugh. "Nothing, just asking." But Laura's instincts were sharp. She seen the same look in her husband's eyes years ago, guilt buried under arrogance. She didn't push Ethan that night, but she didn't sleep easy either. Over the next week, strange things started happening. Someone left a small note under Ryan's door. It said, "You don't belong here." No signature, just red ink. Daniel's garage was repainted by order of the HOA, but the faint outline of the letters still showed through if you looked closely. Richard called it an unfortunate reminder, but some said he liked having it there. Proof, maybe, that he was in control. And yet, one morning, a different kind of rumor spread, a quiet one that didn't start from Richard. Someone claimed they'd seen Ethan near Daniel's house the night of the vandalism. Not Ryan, Ethan. At first, no one dared say it out loud, but gossip travels fast in neighborhoods that pretend to be perfect. Ethan overheard it himself while walking home from school. Two women near the mailboxes were whispering. "I'm just saying," one murmured. "My camera caught movement near Daniel's place that night. The height looked more like Ethan than Ryan." His chest went cold. He wanted to run, but that would only draw attention. He walked calmly past them, heart hammering, pretending not to hear. That evening, he found himself packing in his room again. His phone buzzed, a message from one of his friends, Tyler. "Yo, dude, did you really rat out that new guy? My mom says PPL think you did it." Ethan stared at the screen, his throat tightened. He typed, then erased, then finally sent, "Don't believe everything you hear." But it was too late, the rumor was spreading. Meanwhile, Ryan had had enough. He walked straight to Richard's house one evening, fists clenched. When Richard opened the door, Ryan's voice was low and shaking. "I didn't vandalize anything," he said. "You're spreading lies. Tell your son to stop pointing fingers." Richard stepped forward, towering over him. "Lower your tone, young man. You're lucky we haven't pressed charges yet." Ethan, standing just inside the hallway, froze when Ryan's eyes met his. There was no anger in Ryan's face, just exhaustion, a quiet plea. Ethan looked away. Ryan turned and walked off without another word. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. The guilt was like static in his brain. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Ryan's face. He saw the dripping red letters. He saw his father's proud smile, and it made him sick. So he did something reckless. At 2 a.m., he snuck out of his room, grabbed a flashlight, and walked to Daniel's driveway. He stood in front of the garage, now repainted, and whispered to himself, "I'll fix this. I'll find a way." But as he turned to leave, he saw something glinting near the side bushes, a small, metallic shape. He crouched and picked it up. It was a paint can lid, the same brand and color he'd used. His chest went cold. He thought he'd cleaned everything that night, but apparently not. He was about to pocket it when headlights flashed across the street. A voice called out, "Who's there?" It was Mr. Peterson, the night security guard the HOA had hired after the vandalism. Ethan froze. "Come out where I can see you," Peterson barked. Ethan stepped into the light slowly, heart pounding. "Ethan Langston," the guard frowned, "what are you doing out here at this hour?" "Just couldn't sleep," Ethan muttered, "was walking." Peterson squinted at the object in his hand. "What's that?" Ethan hid it behind his back. "Nothing, just trash." But Peterson's eyes narrowed. "Throw it away properly then. HOA's strict about littering." Ethan nodded quickly and slipped the lid into his pocket. When he got home, his father was waiting. Where were you? Richard demanded, his voice sharp. Just walking, Ethan said. At 2 in the morning. Ethan didn't answer. Richard stared at him for a long time, then said quietly, You've been acting strange lately. I hope you're not hiding anything from me. Ethan forced a tired smile. No, Dad, nothing. But that was the first crack in their perfect image, and Laura saw it. She saw the sweat on her son's forehead, the trembling in his hands. Later, after Richard had gone to bed, Laura knocked softly on Ethan's door. He opened it, eyes red. Sweetheart, she whispered, whatever it is, you can tell me. Ethan's lips trembled. He almost did. But then he saw the picture of his father on the hallway wall, standing proudly with the HOA Award for Excellence in Community Leadership. He shook his head. I can't, Mom. Laura's voice broke. You're scaring me, Ethan. He turned away. Please just trust me. The next morning, another surprise hit Maplewood. Daniel Harris's security camera footage, which had supposedly been blank the night of the vandalism, mysteriously appeared in his cloud storage. Someone must have deleted it before, but now it was back. And the footage showed a figure in a hoodie holding a spray can, short, broad-shouldered, walking with a limp. Not Ryan. Daniel immediately took it to the HOA office. Richard was there as always, sipping coffee. When he saw the footage, his face went pale. That could be anyone, he said quickly. Daniel glared. It's not Ryan, you accused the wrong man. Richard opened his mouth to argue, but just then, Ethan walked in. He froze when he saw the paused video on the laptop screen. The figure in the hoodie, the way the flashlight glinted off the paint can. It was him. Richard noticed his son's face, his eyes narrowed. Ethan, something wrong. Ethan shook his head, but his lips were trembling. Daniel looked between them and said quietly, Your son looks nervous, Mr. Langston. Richard's voice hardened. Enough, this meeting is over. But Daniel didn't move. He leaned forward and said, You've destroyed my reputation. Your son lied, and I'm going to find proof. As Daniel walked out, Ethan's breath came shallow. He could feel his father's stare burning into him. When the door closed, Richard said in a low, dangerous voice, What did you do, Ethan? Ethan's throat went dry. I didn't mean. Answer me, Richard slammed his fist on the desk. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. It was an accident, Dad. I just wanted to scare him. You were always yelling about how he ruined the neighborhood, I thought. Richard's face twisted. You idiot. He paced the room, gripping his hair. Do you realize what you've done? If anyone finds out our name, the board, everything I've built, it's over. Ethan was crying now. I'll tell the truth, I'll apologize. No, Richard snapped. You'll do nothing, you'll keep your mouth shut, I'll handle this. But Dad, I said enough. Richard's voice echoed off the walls. And at that moment, Ethan realized something terrifying. His father wasn't worried about justice, he was worried about reputation. He'd rather destroy someone else's life than admit his own son was guilty. Ethan sat silently, staring at his hands, the same hands that once held the spray can. And in that silence, a single thought began to take shape, a dangerous, desperate thought. If his father wouldn't tell the truth, maybe he would. Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, eyes wide open in the dark. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the ticking clock on his wall. Each second that passed made the guilt heavier. He could still hear his father's voice echoing through his mind, sharp, commanding, filled with rage. You'll do nothing, you'll keep your mouth shut. But that voice was losing its power over him, because in its shadow another sound had started to grow louder, Ryan's voice, the quiet, defeated tone when he said, You're spreading lies. Ethan pressed his palms to his face, his chest burned. His father had built this illusion of perfection around their family. But now Ethan could see the cracks everywhere, in his mother's tired eyes, in the fake smiles at the dinner table, in the fear that ruled their home like a silent law. The next morning, the neighborhood buzzed again. Word had spread about the security footage Daniel had recovered. No one had seen it yet, but whispers filled every driveway, every mailbox corner. Some said it proved Ryan's innocence. Others claimed Daniel had faked it. Ethan could feel eyes on him when he left for school. People smiled less now, or maybe it was just his imagination. By afternoon, the pressure became unbearable. He skipped his last class and walked to the park at the edge of Maplewood. It was the only place where the HOA rules didn't seem to reach. The grass was uneven, the benches chipped, the trees overgrown. It felt real. He sat there for almost an hour before someone else showed up. It was Ryan. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, shirt wrinkled, hands stuffed in his hoodie pockets. He saw Ethan sitting there, hesitated for a moment, then walked closer. "Didn't expect to see you here," Ryan said quietly. Ethan's throat tightened. "Yeah, I just needed some air." Ryan nodded slowly, then sat down on the bench opposite him. For a long time, neither spoke. The wind rustled through the trees, scattering dry leaves across the pavement. Finally, Ryan broke the silence. "You know, when I moved here, I thought this neighborhood would be different, peaceful. People here look happy from the outside, but," he gave a bitter laugh, "it's like everyone's pretending." Ethan looked down at his shoes. "Yeah, pretending." Ryan studied him. "You okay, kid? You look like you haven't slept in days." Ethan almost laughed. "I haven't." Ryan tilted his head. "Something bothering you?" The words came to the edge of Ethan's mouth. "I'm the one who did it," but fear caught them before they could escape. Instead, he whispered, "Do you ever do something you regret and then realize it's too late to fix it?" Ryan's eyes softened. "All the time, but you'd be surprised how much a truth can heal even if it hurts at first." Ethan looked up, their eyes met, and in that moment Ryan seemed to know something, not the full truth but a piece of it. He gave a small, almost sad smile. "Whoever you're trying to protect, kid, make sure they deserve it." He stood and walked away, leaving Ethan frozen in place. Those words sank deep into Ethan's chest, echoing louder than his father's ever could. When Ethan got home that evening, he found his father packing the living room, phone pressed to his ear. His tone was calm but sharp, the voice of a man who always wanted control. "Yes, I've seen the footage," Richard was saying. "It's inconclusive, there's no clear face, just a shape, could be anyone. We're not taking action without proof." He hung up and noticed Ethan standing there. "Where have you been?" "School," Ethan lied. "You missed the HOA meeting this afternoon," Richard said. "I had to deal with that footage nonsense myself. Daniel's trying to stir trouble." Ethan hesitated. "Dad, what if the footage gets clearer? What if someone figures out it was?" Richard's eyes snapped to him, cold and warning. "Don't finish that sentence." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I already took care of it. The footage was submitted for review by the HOA. It won't go public, I'll make sure of that." Ethan's heart sank. "You mean you're covering it up?" "I'm protecting this family," Richard said firmly. "If you care about your mother, about me, you'll do the same." Ethan wanted to scream, to tell him that protecting lies wasn't protection, it was poison, but his father's eyes were like walls of stone. Laura entered just then, holding a laundry basket. She glanced between them, sensing the tension immediately. "Everything okay?" she asked softly. "Everything's fine," Richard said. "Ethan just needs to remember what's at stake." Laura frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Richard didn't answer. He grabbed his keys and left the house without another word. When the door closed, Laura turned to her son. "Ethan, what is going on? Tell me the truth." Ethan's eyes filled again. "Mom, I messed up bad." Laura set the basket down slowly. "What do you mean?" "I'm the one who vandalized Daniel's house." The words came out in a rush, trembling, broken, but real. For a moment, Laura just stood there, frozen. Then she whispered, "Oh my God." "I didn't mean to," Ethan said. "I just wanted to scare him because Dad kept saying he was ruining everything, but then everyone blamed Ryan and I panicked. I lied, Mom, I lied to everyone." Laura covered her mouth, tears pooling in her eyes. "Ethan, I want to tell the truth," he said. "But Dad, he said if anyone finds out, everything's over. He said we'll lose everything." Laura sank into a chair, trembling. "He said that?" Ethan nodded. "He doesn't care about Ryan, he just cares about his reputation." For a long moment, the only sound in the room was Laura's quiet sobbing. Then slowly she said, "You need to do what's right, no matter what your father says." Ethan's voice cracked. "He'll hate me." She reached for his hand. "Maybe, but you'll finally be free." That night, Laura went to bed early, pretending to sleep. But she could hear Richard come home around midnight, hear him whispering on the phone in the kitchen. I told you the footage won't leave the board system. Yes, even if Daniel tries to spread it, we'll handle it internally. Then a pause, a darker tone. If it comes down to it, I'll file harassment charges. That man's not staying here long. Laura's stomach twisted. She had seen this side of him before, the ruthless, cold version that hid behind a polished smile. The next morning, she quietly drove Ethan to school. Before he got out, she said, "If you decide to come clean, I'll stand by you, no matter what happens." He looked at her, eyes wide, and nodded slowly. But neither of them knew that Richard was already setting his own plan in motion. That evening, a notice appeared on Ryan's door, official HOA letterhead, signed by Richard Langston himself. It read, "Due to ongoing incidents and resident complaints, you are requested to vacate Maplewood Estates within 30 days. Failure to comply will result in legal action under Community Violation Clause 7A." Ryan stood in his doorway reading it over and over. His hands trembled with rage. He stormed across the street straight to Richard's house and banged on the door. Richard opened it, feigning surprise. "Ryan, can I help you?" "You're evicting me," Ryan's voice shook, "for something I didn't even do." Richard sighed as if burdened by responsibility. "It's not personal, the community feels uncomfortable. I'm simply enforcing the rules." "The community or you?" Ryan shot back. Richard's jaw tightened. "You should leave before things get worse." Ethan watched from the staircase hidden behind the railing. His pulse was racing. He wanted to run down there to scream the truth, but fear rooted him in place. Ryan clenched his fists. "You're a coward," he said quietly, "hiding behind your title while your kid watches you ruin people's lives." Something flickered in Richard's eyes, anger, then fear. "Get off my property," he said. Ryan turned and walked away without another word. That night, Ethan couldn't take it anymore. He grabbed his phone and recorded a video, shaky, raw, but honest. He sat on the edge of his bed, tears streaking down his face. "My name is Ethan Langston. I'm the one who vandalized Daniel Harris's garage, not Ryan Coleman. I lied because I was scared of my dad, scared of what he'd think, but Ryan's innocent, and I can't keep this secret anymore." He saved the video but didn't post it yet. He wanted to talk to his mom first. When morning came, she wasn't home. Her car was gone. Instead, there was a note on the kitchen counter, her handwriting shaky but determined. "Ethan, I went to talk to Daniel. We'll fix this together. Love, Mom." Ethan's heart sank. He ran outside, barely remembering to grab his jacket. The air was cold and biting as he sprinted down the street toward Daniel's house. But before he reached it, he saw Richard's car parked in front of Daniel's driveway. His father was already there, standing face to face with Daniel and Laura, his expression cold and furious. Ethan froze behind a tree, watching. Daniel was holding his phone, showing something to Richard. "Your son confessed to my wife," Daniel said. "She told me everything. I don't want to ruin him, but you owe Ryan an apology." Richard's face went pale, then his voice turned venomous. "You tell anyone about this and I'll bury you in lawsuits. You understand me? You think anyone will believe a man like you over the HOA president?" Laura's voice cut through sharply. "Stop it, Richard, it's over. He's just a kid. Let him take responsibility before it destroys him." Richard turned to her, eyes blazing. "You don't understand what's at stake." But she stood her ground. "No, you don't. You've turned this family into a lie." At that moment, Ethan stepped out from behind the tree. "Dad." Richard spun around, his face drained of color. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" Ethan walked closer, voice trembling but clear. "I'm telling the truth." He pulled out his phone and hit upload. Richard's eyes widened as the video began uploading to every neighborhood group chat. Ethan was part of Maplewood Community, HOA Board Updates, Residents Forum. "Ethan, stop!" Richard lunged forward, but it was too late. The progress bar hit 100%. The confession was out. Daniel stared stunned. Laura covered her mouth, tears falling. Richard's voice broke into a shout. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Ethan looked him in the eyes. "Yeah, I finally did the right thing." And then, from down the street, phones began buzzing. Notifications, gasps, doors opening, neighbors stepping outside, holding their screens, whispering to each other. The perfect illusion of Maplewood was cracking, piece by piece. Richard's hands shook. "You'll regret this," he whispered. But Ethan didn't move. For the first time in years, he wasn't afraid. That night, the entire neighborhood was talking. The video had gone viral within Maplewood. By morning, even local news channels had picked it up. The headline read, "HOA President's Son Confesses to Vandalism, Blamed Innocent Neighbor." Reporters parked near the entrance, cameras flashed, HOA members scrambled to distance themselves. Inside the Langston home, silence hung like smoke. Richard hadn't spoken since last night. He sat in his office, blinds drawn, staring at the screen as angry emails poured in. Laura quietly packed a bag upstairs. Ethan sat on the couch, numb. He didn't know what would happen next, only that something had broken for good. The doorbell rang. Laura went to answer and froze. It was Ryan. He looked calm, almost tired, but his eyes were softer now. "Can I talk to Ethan?" he asked. She nodded. When Ethan stepped into the doorway, Ryan looked at him for a long time before saying, "Took guts to do what you did." "I'm sorry," Ethan whispered, "for everything." Ryan nodded slowly. "Apology accepted, just take care of yourself, kid." He turned to leave, but before he did, he glanced at Richard's office door and said quietly, "Maybe now this neighborhood can finally start being honest." Then he walked away, leaving Ethan staring after him, unsure whether to feel relief or fear. Because somewhere deep inside, he knew this wasn't over. His father wasn't the kind of man who lost quietly. And the look in Richard Langston's eyes that night, that cold, silent rage, promised that the real storm hadn't even started yet. For 2 days the Langston house sat in silence. The curtains stayed closed, the phone rang unanswered. Neighbors who once smiled now crossed the street to avoid looking at them. Richard Langston, once the proud face of Maplewood Estates, was a ghost in his own home. His photo still hung in the HOA office, but someone had scribbled across it in red ink, "Fake." Ethan barely left his room. The confession had freed him from the lie, but not from the aftermath. Every time he scrolled through social media, he saw his own face on screens. "HOA President's Son Comes Clean. Suburban Scandal Exposes Toxic HOA Culture." He told the truth, yes, but now the truth had teeth. His father's career was over. Sponsors, property agents, even the local council all had cut ties. And the more Richard's world collapsed, the quieter he became. Too quiet. Laura tried to keep the peace. She made tea no one drank. She left soft knocks on Ethan's door, gentle words he barely heard. But the tension in the house felt alive, a living thing that crept into every shadow. On the third night, Ethan woke to the sound of voices downstairs. He tiptoed out, careful not to make the stairs creak. His father was on the phone again. His voice was low, controlled, but the words sent a chill through Ethan's spine. "I don't care what it costs. I want everything on Daniel Harris and that Coleman kid. I want leverage, records, debts, anything that can discredit them." Ethan froze, his stomach turned. His father wasn't just angry, he was planning revenge. "Once the board sees what kind of people they are," Richard continued, "they'll forget this whole thing ever happened. I'll rebuild, I always do." He hung up and leaned back, sighing. Then he noticed something, movement on the stairs. Their eyes met. "Couldn't sleep?" Richard asked softly. Ethan didn't answer, his throat was dry. Richard stood, straightening his jacket. "You think this is over, don't you? You think one video destroys me? You're young, son, you don't understand how the world works." Ethan's voice trembled. "You're hurting people who didn't do anything wrong." Richard chuckled, a bitter, hollow sound. "You think I'm the villain? I built this neighborhood, I made people proud to live here, and now they want to throw me away because of a mistake you made." "It wasn't my mistake," Ethan said quietly. "It was ours." Richard's smile vanished, his eyes hardened. "Don't you dare put this on me." Laura appeared in the doorway just then, her face pale. "Richard, stop." He turned sharply. "Stay out of this." "No," she said, voice steady. "I'm done staying out of it. This," she gestured around the room, "this obsession with image, with control, it's destroying us." Richard stepped closer. "You think I enjoy this? You think I wanted any of this?" Laura's eyes filled. "You had a choice, you always had a choice." For a moment no one spoke. Then Richard exhaled, the fury flickering out for just a second. He rubbed his temples. "I did everything for this family," he muttered, "everything." And he walked out into the night. The door slammed shut, and the echo lingered long after he was gone. That was the last time they saw him for 2 days. During those 2 days, the HOA board called an emergency meeting, this time without Richard. They voted to remove him as president. The vote was unanimous. Daniel Harris and Ryan Coleman were both publicly cleared. Ryan even received a formal apology from the HOA. Cameras caught it, reporters filmed it, and for a brief moment Maplewood tried to pretend it was healing. But Ethan knew better. He could feel it like a storm building at the edge of town. His father wasn't finished. He'd vanished once before, years ago, during another scandal, then come back stronger, colder. And now, somewhere in that silence, Ethan knew he was planning something worse. On the fifth night, just past midnight, the lights in the house flickered. A car engine idled outside. Ethan looked through the blinds. It was his father's car. He slipped on his hoodie and crept outside. The cold air bit his face. Richard stood near the trunk, pulling something out, a box of files, thick envelopes, a laptop bag. "Dad," Ethan called. Richard turned. The streetlight cast long shadows across his face. He looked older, broken, but his eyes still burned. "Where are you going?" Ethan asked. "Somewhere I can rebuild," Richard said. "Somewhere people still respect what I've done." "Rebuild?" Ethan stepped closer. "You ruined people's lives. You lied to everyone, including yourself." Richard's jaw clenched. "You don't understand. They needed someone to lead them. Without me, this neighborhood will rot." "Maybe it needs to," Ethan said. His voice cracked, but he didn't back down. "Maybe it needs to fall apart before it can be real again." For a moment, Richard just stared at him. Then something shifted in his eyes, grief, maybe, or regret. "You're my son," he said softly. "You could have been just like me." Ethan met his gaze. "That's exactly why I told the truth." The silence between them was heavy, almost sacred. Then Richard closed the trunk, got in the car, and drove away without another word. The taillights disappeared down the hill, swallowed by the dark. Ethan stood there long after the engine faded. His breath rose in clouds. The night was painfully quiet. When he finally went back inside, Laura was sitting on the couch, holding her wedding ring in her hand. She looked up at him, tears in her eyes, and whispered, "He's gone, isn't he?" Ethan nodded. She set the ring on the table. "Maybe it's better this way." Weeks passed. The HOA dissolved under new leadership. The Langstons' perfect house went up for sale. Most neighbors pretended to move on, though the whispers never truly stopped. Ryan and Daniel became unlikely friends, bound by the chaos that had torn through their street. Sometimes they waved to Ethan when they saw him walking his dog, and he'd wave back, quietly thankful. Life began to feel almost normal again, almost. But one morning, a letter arrived, no return address, just his name, Ethan, written in neat, sharp handwriting. He opened it slowly. Inside was a single line. "The truth doesn't set you free, it only changes your cage." No signature, but he knew the handwriting instantly. His father. Ethan folded the paper, his hands trembling. He looked out the window at the street, bright, clean, too quiet. Everything looked perfect again, the lawns trimmed, the fences repainted, the illusion restored. But under that perfect surface, something darker pulsed, a reminder that some lies never really die. That evening, he went to the park again, the same bench where he'd first talked to Ryan. The trees swayed in the wind. He could almost hear his father's voice in the rustling leaves, still trying to justify it all. Ethan sat there for a long time, the letter in his hand. Until the sun dipped below the houses, then he tore the letter into pieces and let the wind scatter them. When he stood up to leave, he saw someone approaching Ryan. "Hey," Ryan said softly, "haven't seen you around much." Ethan shrugged, trying to stay out of trouble. Ryan smiled faintly. "You did something most adults can't do, you told the truth even when it cost you everything." Ethan looked away. "Did it change anything?" Ryan thought for a moment. "Maybe not everything, but it changed you, and sometimes that's enough." They stood there in silence as the first stars began to appear. Back at the Langston house, Laura packed the last of their things. She taped up a box marked MEMORIES and took one last look at the walls that had once held family photos. She whispered a quiet goodbye and locked the door behind her. By morning, the for sale sign out front had been replaced with sold. The Langstons were gone. But Maplewood Estates carried their story like a scar. The HOA rewrote its rules, new faces filled the board, but the legend of what had happened, the vandalism, the lie, the confession, became something of a ghost story. Parents told their kids, "Don't lie, or you'll end up like the Langston boy." Neighbors warned newcomers, "This street looks peaceful, but it remembers." And sometimes, late at night, people swore they saw a car idling at the far end of the cul-de-sac, a black sedan with its headlights off. Watching. Maybe it was just imagination. Or maybe Richard Langston never really left Maplewood. For Ethan, the past never truly faded. Months later, at a small apartment in the next town, he started writing everything down: the vandalism, the lies, the truth, all of it. He didn't know if anyone would ever read it, but it felt like the only way to make sense of it all. He ended his journal with one sentence: "I learned that truth isn't clean, it doesn't fix what's broken, it just shows you where the cracks really are." He closed the notebook, set it aside, and opened the window. Outside, kids laughed, sprinklers hissed, the world kept moving. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan smiled, not because things were perfect, but because they were real. The wind carried the last echo of Maplewood away, soft and haunting. Somewhere far off, a car door closed. And the story of the Langstons, of lies, truth, and the price of perfection, finally came to an end.